I am Terry Rawls, and I've done this presentation or a version of it a few times now at a couple of conferences and another webinar. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can get going. There we are. Yeah, good. Now, oops. Okay, so let's get we'll get going. I can tell you a little bit about myself. I spent 35 years in higher ed. I probably that was a longer run than I should have had because for several years before that I was a trainer. In fact, I was the training manager for the Iowa Department of Substance Abuse. And so when you get that training mindset and then you go into education, it can create some interesting times, that's for sure. My area in which I taught and researched was counselor education. And you'll hear a little more of that as we get through this. More recently, I've worked with a colleague to develop and launch Leading in Analytics, which is an online program, a leadership development program, which is actually available through the Informs catalog. So you can go into the professional development part of the website and take a look at that program. I encourage you to do so. You're here because whatever reason brought you here today. Here's what's going to happen. So today we're going to talk about communication skills. The most important law, maybe the most important law of all, interpersonal and team communication skills. We're going to talk about conflict management, storytelling, how to learn new skills. And I'm going to take a little different approach. In a world of Gen AI and instant access to information, what I've found is I can go through this material pretty quickly. When you find something that really resonates, you're going to research it. And I'm going to tell you right now, particularly to talk about skill development. The social media sites are loaded with really good quality videos on how to learn new skills, how to practice them. There are opportunities. I'm working right now on an educational program that actually allows for practicing new skills. And hopefully that we're still a little ways from that coming out, but if you're curious, keep in touch. So we'll move pretty quickly today. If you can get the presentation when this is done, and then you can go back in, reach out to me if you have specific questions beyond the questions we'll have at the end of today. So this all started in 1977. I was a new graduate, degree in sociology from the University of Iowa. I found myself down in rural North Georgia doing a pilot project with the juvenile courts. I got a call to do a presentation in a church in Calhoun, Georgia. So on a Sunday evening, I drove up to Calhoun and walked into the church, was positioned in the podium, and the dozen or so people sat in the pews. And I started to do my presentation, and I don't believe I got a complete sentence out of my mouth. It was the most frightening thing I think I've ever done. I sweated like I've never sweated in my life. At the end of it, I hope that they got something from it. What I got was this idea that whatever my career path was going to be, I was going to have to learn how to speak to a group. So I started working on that. Now, in that day, you didn't have the internet. This is 1970 something. And so what I did do is go to the library and I talked to family and friends. And I focused on this idea of introverts and extroverts. I became aware that I was a very, very high introvert. And that speaking to a group like that off the cuff was an extrovert kind of thing. Introverts and extroverts, the easiest way of thinking about it is, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, but is introverts tend to process inside, take in information, and when they speak, they've thought it through. Extroverts, on the other hand, take in information and they process it out loud. So they simply, as they have a thought, it comes across their lips. This one is not better than the other. in one context or another. One might be more functional than the other, but it doesn't, it's not about one or the other. To be honest, it's not about changing. I've spoken to, well, I've done over 100 commencement addresses, graduation addresses at schools all over the world. I've spoken to groups as small as 2 or 3 and to an audience of 20,000 or more than 20,000. I didn't change from being an introvert to being an extrovert. I learned how to be an extrovert, how to look like I am an extrovert. I can get away with that today. I love the Hawking quote when I think about introverts and extroverts. Quiet people have the loudest minds. And someone who starts a sentence curious about how it will end actually was a conversation that my friend Todd Zakryzek, who's a very high extrovert and a leading authority on teaching and learning, and a conversation we had 20 years ago up in Michigan, actually. Starts a sentence curious about how it will end. Now, one more little piece of information that'll help so that we can jump into this. In 1988, I was in Pocatello, Idaho, working on my doctorate. And to make ends meet, I had a private counseling practice on the side. And one day, this young man showed up on my schedule and came in, and we met. And he just moved to Pocatello from Northern California. The company had moved him there, basically. He could either keep his job and make that move or stay in California and find something else to do. He said, in California, I had friends and neighbors and people, and I knew what I was doing. Here, I don't know anyone. There are a couple of people at work that came over also, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know how to meet people. High introvert. It was hard enough for him just to have that conversation with me individually. We worked together for about a year, and it's been the basis of a lot of work that I've done, which is around how to help people make that transition, how to use extroversion if they're an introvert. And interestingly, last night I spent an hour and a half on the phone with a fellow who I've been coaching for quite a few years now, who is a very, very high extrovert. And a lot of our conversation is around helping him dial back the extroversion. He's a very accomplished business person, very successcal, and a lot of that is because he's figured out how to dial that back. The other thing, and we're going to talk some about story. The other thing that we've worked on a lot is about telling stories. So that experience in Pocatello with that young man, and actually my caseload in my practice, pretty soon I was seeing all of his colleagues also. We did some group work together, and it led me to explore this idea of the law of requisite variety. I still think it might be, thou shalt not kill is pretty high up there also, I guess. But the law of requisite variety, just sponsoring today's program, is a very, very simple, here's the entire law. In any interconnected system, think of a mobile with the parts, and when you move one, it moves all of the others. The element with the widest range of responses will be the controlling element. I'm not talking about controlling people. I'm talking about controlling yourself. I'm talking about the law of requisite variety is about ultimately about communications, as we'll see. It is about, well, here's a great example. After my master's degree, I worked for a while in inner city Atlanta at a hospital doing psychiatric triage. So they'd bring people in off the street. And they brought in a guy one evening, and he was at the local Wendy's, and he was sampling hamburgers, going around picking up handfuls of French fries and taking drinks out of people's drinks. And they're kind of filtering, trying to get out of the place. At that moment, he was the controlling element in that interconnected system. Because he had the widest range, some of those bizarre behaviors, some of those responses were inappropriate. When the police came, however, they always have a wider range. They have stun guns and guns, and they are well trained to handle that sort of situation. So they became the element with the widest range of responses and became the controlling element in that context. So we understand introversion and extroversion. We understand the law of requisite variety. We need to understand how to become the controlling element, how to get that ability to get what we need. Communication skills. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about how we communicate with others, how we communicate with ourselves. And that's fantastic because communication skills, you can learn those. There's a variety of ways. I'm going to do that plug one more time. As soon as you hear something here and you're not sure about it or it sounds interesting, just start the search process. You're going to find resources so that you can learn and grow. Ultimately, what we're after. This is from the wall of my grandson's preschool. I always put this in the presentations because I just think it's really cool. These are basic communication skills and basic living skills, if you will. We won't go into those. We're going to aim a little bit higher than preschool. But what we are going to talk about just real quickly, we're going to talk about on the left, projects versus an organization with a mature analytics function. And you can think about this as if you're a one-person shop or just a handful of people versus working for Tableau or Microsoft or someone. There are some differences in some of the skill sets we need. We're also going to talk about interpersonal skills, which is interacting with each other, and then team skills, which is kind of how we build and manage a team. First thing that's really nice in the interpersonal skills, they're the same, whatever size organization, whatever you're doing. It's about empathy, which is the ability to understand what others are feeling or going through. Active listening, which is that ability to both listen and then reflect back an understanding of what that person is going through. Nonverbal cues, paying attention to both the nonverbal cues we are sending out and others are sending to us. And then conflict management, something that we always come up against and have to manage. We're going to dive into that a little deeper in just a minute. The team skills do vary a little bit now. And in a small organization, dependability, flexibility, patience are absolutely skills that we want to develop. Not that difficult too, as long as we have the awareness. Leading from the middle is another set of skills that can be challenging, but in a smaller organization in particular, sometimes you may be the only person in your shop, the only person doing dashboards for the organization or whatever it might be. You can use that position to lead from the middle of the organization to try to shape where the organization is going with data, which is so important. I spend a lot of time with businesses around the country these days, and moving from gut-driven decision-making to data-driven decision-making is all that they think about these days. With a large organization, leadership skills, thinking big picture, what's going on in the industry, where do we fit in that, where could we fit into that, how do we get there, is really important. Story, now you'll want to use story in a small organization also, but particularly in large organizations, focusing on how to construct and use a story, and we'll talk some about this in just a minute, is very important. Basic project management and taking risk are skills that you just need to focus on developing. So there's the whole group. Now let's jump in a little bit here. How am I going to learn interpersonal communication skills? This is pretty simple, actually. Just go down these. I should have numbered them 1, 2, and 3. First, you start with nonverbal communication. You pay attention to what am I communicating nonverbally? Am I closed up or am I open to whatever's coming at me, the conversation I'm having? Seek and evaluate feedback. Um, find an extrovert friend. Someone. Todd was an extrovert friend of mine. Still is today. We both happen to move to North Carolina and live a couple of miles apart and get together on a regular basis. Um, and so focus on that. That extrovert friend can help because it's someone you can just bounce thoughts off of, experiences off of as you go. And then practice active listening. And that's about listening. If you meet a new person and they say, "Hi, I'm Fred. How you doing?" You say, "Oh, I'm Jim." And you've already forgotten Fred's name because you were thinking about what am I going to say? You've lost the thread. Active listening is about stopping, pausing, listening, and then there are little tricks you can learn to help remember someone's name. And I'll let you discover those if that's something you need to. They're kind of fun, actually. Conflict management. I was asked to teach conflict resolution years ago, back when I was a professor. And so I did the research. I put together this great class, and halfway through the semester, I realized I blew it, totally blew it. I thought that the goal was to resolve conflict, and that's just not that's actually just not the case. As we really dug into it, what I learned was the goal is to manage conflict. Conflict is good. Conflict is healthy. It is from conflict that we find solutions in the middle, typically. It is, but it takes conflict to get to those solutions, those durable solutions. And so, some just quick tips, and then again, do the research. There's all kinds of training programs on conflict management. Practice active listening, using empathy would be at the top of my list. Collaborate to find a solution. It's about meeting and talking through the issues. Clarifying the source of the conflict. What specifically is this that we're not connecting on, so that we can move from there. And then separate the behavior from the personhood. That someone's doing something that you don't like or that creates problems or issues for you doesn't mean they're a bad person. They're doing it for a reason, and it's a legitimate reason. And so, yeah, pull those two apart and focus on the behavior. What behavior do we need to change or adjust, or can I adapt to? Told you I was going to go fast through this game. This let's spend a minute on storytelling is so critically important. And I'm thinking about this in the context of bringing analytics into organizations and maturing analytics functions within organizations. We've got to have great communications. We connect with each other through stories. We love stories. Movies are stories, TV shows, series. Pretty much everywhere we're surrounded by stories, and we always have been. When we were sitting around fires, because we didn't have other entertainment media, we told stories, and that it goes deep within us. And so it's important as we think about how can we be successful communicators, to figure out how do we tell the stories. Now, there are two stories in every project. There's the story that the data tells. My friend that I spent an hour and a half on the phone with last night, this is one of the things that we've worked a lot on, is how to take the data and then present it in a way that tells a story. The second is the story of a project. And that's what I want to focus on today, because I think that's something that you can do regardless of your role within an organization, how big or small the organization is. If you don't have a systemized way of telling stories, you can get to work on it. Every story has a beginning. Clearly states the problem, and not just like how I see the problem that each relevant point of view sees it from. The business person in the organization may see it very differently than the analyst does, which may, the executive may see it a very different way also. Having those conversations is a key part of building for success, because if you can't agree on what the problem is, you're never going to come to a solution. The process by which a problem became a project, who was involved, What were the key issues? What were the opportunities that we're looking for? What are the outcomes that we're looking for as we build this project, this story? Every story has a middle, which is just a great place to talk about the data, the team, the tools. Um, each of those deserves a chapter, if you will, within the story, and then an end. And in the end, it's the steps that were taken, um, how that unfolded, and then what the results are with the recommendations, the actions that are going to be taken. And all of this can be put together. Uh, I'm a huge fan of uh, decks, of slide decks, and to build a story. So people are accustomed to looking at slide decks. Slide decks make you be concise. If you do it with bullet points, then it gives you, it kind of forces you to really focus on what's important. And it makes it easy for the reader to quickly go through it and gain the information that they're looking for. You want to start sharing this deck early. And with every stakeholder you can get in front of. Use multiple methods. If there are emails, attach it to your emails. Newsletters or presentations, opportunities within the organization. I really recommend, if there's someone relate in a project that you're working on that you don't really have a relationship, set up a call with them. Or if you're in the same time space, get together for coffee. But you can practice your communication skills as well as deepen the understanding of the project, the thing that you are working on together. You want people across the organization to be engaged. You want them to be curious about your project and about what's going to happen next. It's fine to be sharing the deck when it's underway. You want to do that because you want them to help write the end of the story. You want to be clear. You want to be concise. You do not want to be clever. People, that doesn't help. Know when to end the guitar solo. I don't. You can see some of the guitars hanging behind me here. But how many songs are there out there when the guitarist didn't get the word, and they just keep going and going and going? So focus again. Be very clear and concise on what you're doing, and involve the audience in your call to action. Get them engaged with this process. Developing empathy it can be a challenge, but there's lots of ways of doing it, and lots of different models for doing it. Udemy has a course, Learn How to Develop Self-Awareness, which is a really good starting point. I've not taken the course, but I've looked at it and I thought it was really well done. The Myers-Briggs is the test that gives you introversion, extroversion, among others. Reach out to your HR and see if they have availability of the Myers-Briggs. Many do, and you might be able to take it if you haven't taken it in the past. The Big Five personality test is an online test. You can look it up. And if you just want to model for understanding yourself and others, which is what empathy is about. The 5 love languages is fantastic. If you're in intimate relationships with others, family and or friends, it's a really nice way of deepening communication. And Navigate is a little book by Dr. Sri McHenry that is, if you're working with colleagues and you're kind of things, you would like a deeper understanding of your colleagues, the kinds of people. If it Navigate's aimed more at people who are supervising and helping them understand the people that they are supervising. This is my shameless plug. Become a student of leadership, no matter where you are. I've been hanging around in forums for a few years now, and I've talked with a lot of folks, and they'll say, "I just want to do the math." I just love doing the math, and I think that's fantastic. They should just do the math. But I think it's important for everyone to get a little bit more of that big picture, whatever role you're in, even if you just want to do the math, to really get a better understanding of the organization, the industry, and kind of how all of it fits together, because you will be able to improve your contributions if you do. The book Leading in Analytics by Joseph Kazier is available and is fantastic. It's based on the 5 manageable tasks, which you find in the Informs ABOC, or the course Leading in Analytics, which is a self-paced online course. We interviewed about 3 dozen professionals all over the world who've been successful in doing analytics, and you can learn from their wisdom. It's fantastic. And this kind of brings us to the end. So the law of requisite variety says, if within our interconnected systems, family, friends, work, however you want to define that, the element with the widest range of responses, that ability to think differently, to look at things differently, will be the controlling element. And that happens through learning communication skills. And that is the presentation. I said I was going to do it in 30 minutes. How did I do?
On the dot.
Pretty good.
That was great, Terry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If people have questions, you can go ahead and answer, put them in the Q&A. I was also going to offer up the Informs Analytics framework. Although it's a process for solving analytics problems, I think that you could use the same framework to help craft your story in a way that would really help communicate with supervisors and non-technical people.
Yep.
That your supervisors are non-technical.
Yep.
All right.
Hey, Sean. Sean has it's been a big contributor to Leading in Analytics. And he gave us probably the greatest quote when we first met him and he took the course. And he said, if you want to understand the quality of your data, just start making decisions on it, based on it. And we have, I've used that quote again and again and again. Thanks, Sean.
Sean was the last year's chair of the Informs Analytics Plus conference. And we do have our conference next year in National Harbor. It's April 12th through 14th. And if you feel like you would like to present there, you can submit an application to speak up through January 12th.
I recommend that conference. It's a good one every year. And National Harbor will be fun.
Yes, it will. There's lots of cool things to do there.
Yeah.
All right. We will get you a link, Denise, to the book. I'm assuming you mean the Leading in Analytics book. Question mark?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get that to you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Terry, again. We appreciate your time, and we'll give you all some time back this afternoon. And we have another webinar on January 22nd with Evan Wimpy. He is the Director of Analytics at PyMC Labs, and he is a data comedian. So you don't want to miss that. His topic will be decisions under uncertainty, how to say I'm not sure without you losing your job. So another good communication topic. So we hope to see you then. And until then, have a great day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.